Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Dollar Dialogue. Today's episode 26, Silicon Ambitions, Vietnam's tech boom and Southeast Asia's quest for economic transformation with Mr. Neev Manuja. Mr. Neev Manuja is a junior at International School, Ho Chi Minh City. He's a very talented individual. He's very much interested in learning about economic and political matters. He currently lives in Southeast Asia. He lives in Vietnam. So he's also very much interested in the economic growth of this part of the world. And we're very glad to have him with us here today. Mr. Neev Manuja, is there anything that you would like to add to the introduction that I've just said?
So, hello guys, and I'll just like to thank Araf for this great introduction. And I just want to say that I'm really looking forward to having a great discussion on this topic.
Thank you, Mr. Neev Manuja. Now let's get into our discussion. Episode 26, Silicon Ambitions, Vietnam's tech boom and Southeast Asia's quest for economic transformation. So the for Southeast Asia, for in this meeting, let's refer to them as ASEAN. So the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, is a political and economic organization consisting of 10 Southeast Asian countries: Brunei, Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, the Philippines, Singapore, Vietnam, and Thailand, with a combined population of over 660 million people and a GDP exceeding $3.5 trillion. ASEAN plays a critical role in global trade and investment flows. Its strategic location between major economies like China, India, and Japan has made the region an economic powerhouse, but there is a substantial diversity in economic performance among its members. And ASEAN as a whole has demonstrated economic growth over the past few decades, with growth rates consistently outpacing global averages. And despite global challenges such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the region's economy has shown resilience. In fact, in 2023, the ASEAN GDP was valued at around $3.5 trillion, and the GDP had a growth rate of around 5 to 6% before the pandemic, though the region was hard hit during COVID-19 and begin recovery in 2021. And as for the top economies in ASEAN, the largest economy is Indonesia with a GDP of around $1.3 trillion, followed by Thailand with a GDP of around $543 billion in 2023, then Malaysia with a GDP of around $422 billion in 2023, and then Vietnam with a GDP of around $413 billion in 2023. And ASEAN has also emerged as a crucial trading bloc, being the fifth largest economy in the world by trade volume. The region benefits from its strategic location and extensive trade agreements, including the ASEAN Free Trade Area, AFTA, and Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP, and the intra-ASEAN trade is around 22 to 23% of the total ASEAN trade. And the top trade partners for these countries include China, with a trade volume of around $880 billion, followed by US with a trade volume of around $400 billion, then EU with a trade volume of around $270 billion, then Japan with a trade volume of $240 billion, and then South Korea with a trade, and then there's also then South Korea with a trade volume of around $180 billion. And ASEAN is also a significant recipient of foreign direct investment, benefiting from strong investor confidence due to stable macroeconomic conditions and growing consumer markets. And in 2022, they had a FDI inflows of $224 billion. And the top FDI recipients for the ASEAN nations were Singapore with around $118 billion. In fact, 53% of ASEAN's total trade for foreign direct investment was in Singapore. Then it was Indonesia with around $23 billion, and Vietnam with around $18 billion. And ASEAN faces several challenges, including income disparity, infrastructure gaps, political instability in some member states such as Myanmar, and the economic impact of climate change, which threatens agriculture and coastal areas. Moreover, the rise of protectionism and trade tensions can impact the region's global trade dynamics. So is there anything else that you would like to add to the things that I've just said, or any more opinions about the ASEAN nations, Mr. Neev Manuja, Mr. Arif Malik, or Mr. Shazib Karim?
Yeah, so today I have the distinct privilege of discussing the phenomenal rise of Vietnam as a formidable tech hub in Southeast Asia, a transformation I have witnessed firsthand. In recent years, our nation has captured global attention with a remarkable influx of over $1.5 billion in startup funding in 2022 alone, a staggering 40% increase from the previous year. As a Vietnamese resident, I have seen how this growth is not merely numerical, but transformative, reshaping our urban and economic landscapes. Our government's commitment to fostering an environment conducive to technological innovation has been instrumental. Through significant tax incentives and strategic investments in technology education, we have enabled cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi to become the epicenters of tech development. It fills me with pride to say that these cities now host over 75% of the new tech firms in our country. The ripple effects of Vietnam's tech ascendancy extend throughout Southeast Asia. The region's digital economy burgeoned to $174 billion in gross merchandise value in 2022, pushed by a 20% growth from the prior year. This is a testament to the vitality and dynamism that technology brings to our economies. I am particularly inspired by initiatives such as Singapore's Smart Nation project and Thailand's Eastern Economic Corridor. These initiatives are not just plans on paper, but are creating real world impacts, integrating AI and IoT into daily life and boosting economic output significantly. Living in Vietnam during this tech boom, I witnessed the opportunities and challenges daily. The growth brings with a demand for skilled labor and the need to bridge the digital divide that still exists in our rural areas. So, what do you all think about the ongoing technological transformation in Vietnam and its impact on the broader Southeast Asian economy? How do you see these developments influencing global economic dynamics in the upcoming years?
Splendidly spoken, Mr. Neev Manuja. And yeah, I would agree with you regarding Vietnam growing as a tech hub in Southeast Asia. In my opinion, this is a classic textbook example of the spillover effect, where the tech industry's expansion benefit the other sectors of the economy. And I would say the influx of tech companies in Vietnam increases demand for local services from real estate to hospitality, thereby boosting the overall aggregate economy. And I would say Vietnam's strategic investments in technology education is not only preparing a skilled workforce, but also enhancing the country's competitiveness on a global scale. I would say this has been reflected through the significant increase in foreign direct investment in Vietnam's tech sector, as you mentioned, with over $1.5 billion in startup funding in 2022 alone. So clearly, there is influx of FDI, which I attribute to the smart decisions undertaken by the Vietnamese government. And I would also say that the 40% rise in start funding in 2022 exemplifies the entrepreneurial spirit that is booming in Vietnam. And this surge is crucial for innovation and helping transition the Vietnamese economy from its traditional basis in agriculture and manufacturing to more technologically driven industries. And furthermore, I would say this will also cement Southeast Asia as a place where we're more where countries are more than just manufacturing hubs. They can also be technologically driven as well. And I would say, despite all of this, Vietnam still faces the challenges such as significant digital divide and a shortage of highly skilled workers. I would say the rural areas in particular are at risk of being left behind in the tech boom. And addressing these challenges requires a sustained efforts in education and infrastructure development, similar to initiatives seen in other regions. For instance, Singapore's Smart Nation project demonstrates the potential of comprehensive government planning and tech integration, which Vietnam could emulate. And similarly, Thailand's Eastern Economic Corridor also aims to boost economic activities through advanced technology, which could potentially help Vietnam. So I would say Vietnam is a classic example of a nation emerging of an emerging nation, which is on its path and trajectory to be a nation that is that has more highly skilled labor and is on path to be one of the developed nations in around half a century or so.
Yeah, and I'd say I fully agree with you. But adding on, I'd say like what you said. Of course, with the rapid growth, it comes with new challenges, and I'd say that Vietnam, like many emerging tech economies, it faces hurdles such as regulatory uncertainty, cybersecurity concerns, and talent shortages in demand sectors like software development and AI, which you had mentioned, Arif. But I'd said, but these challenges also present opportunities for regional cooperation. Like Southeast Asian nations are increasingly pooling their resources, forming digital partnerships, and leveraging each other's strengths to build a more integrated digital economy. And we've already seen initiatives like the ASEAN Smart Cities Network that aim to bring tech-driven solutions to urban challenges across the region. So I'd say as Vietnam continues its tech journey, other Southeast nations are watching closely, learning from its success and pitfalls, and they're also preparing to make their own mark on the global tech stage.
Thank you everyone for the invaluable opinions that have been shared. Yes, I agree that the ASEAN is a growing economy and it has a lot of potential. And as for Vietnam, in my opinion, it has emerged as a dynamic and rapidly growing economy, often hailed as the next Asian tiger. And Vietnam also has maintained impressive economic growth rates over the past decade, driven by its export-led growth model, rising domestic consumption, and strategic reforms. The country's GDP reached $413 billion in 2023, making it the fourth largest in ASEAN. And it also had a GDP growth rate of around 6.3% and a GDP per capita of around $4,110. And Vietnam's poverty reduction has also dropped from 58% in the 1990s to below 6% in 2023. And Vietnam's economy is very diversified, but the most significant contributors are manufacturing, services, and agriculture. Vietnam has become a manufacturing hub, especially for electronics, textiles, and footwear. And major global companies such as Samsung, Apple, and Intel have significant production bases in Vietnam. And manufacturing accounted for 23.1% of GDP in 2023. And Vietnam is also the second largest exporter of electronics in ASEAN after Singapore. And the service sector combined contributed to 41% of GDP in 2023, with retail, finance, and real estate being key areas. And though declining in importance relative to other sectors, agriculture still contributes to around 14% of GDP, employing near 30% of the labor force. Vietnam is also a major exporter of rice, coffee, and seafood, and it has exported around 6.5 million metric tons in 2023, with around 1.7 million metric tons of coffee exports in 2023. And Vietnam has also seen a rise in foreign direct investment. The country has become a magnet for multinational companies looking to diversify their supply chain, especially in the light of US-China trade war. And the foreign direct investment inflows of Vietnam was around $18 billion in 2022, with the top investors being South Korea, Japan, and Singapore. And the key sectors for the foreign direct investment include manufacturing and processing industries, which received the largest share. And Vietnam's trade performance is also a key driver of its economic growth. In 2023, it recorded a trade surplus of $11.2 billion. The country's integration into global trade networks has been bolstered by numerous trade agreements, FTAs, including RCEP, and Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership, CPTPP, with exports of around $372 billion and imports of around $361 billion. And the top export markets for Vietnam include US, China, and EU, with US being 28% of total exports. And Vietnam's young population and abundant force have been major asset for its economic development. However, the country faces challenges regarding upskilling and addressing a growing middle-income trap. It has a population of around 100 million people and a labor force of around 55 million people, with an unemployment rate of 2.1%. And Vietnam has also embraced the fourth industrial revolution, focusing on digital transformation, innovation, and technology-driven industries. The government aims to make Vietnam a high-income country by 2045, with a focus on digital economic development. It has a digital economy size of around $23 billion, and Vietnam's economic market has seen a growth rate of around 32. Vietnam's e-commerce market has seen a growth rate of 30 to 35% annually, reaching $60 billion in 2023. And Vietnam has also become a vibrant hub for tech startups, with over 3,000 tech startups as of 2023. So, are there any opinions or any new information you like to add to the Vietnam's economic analysis that I've just done, Mr. Shazib Karim, Arif Malik, or Mr. Neev Manuja?
I'd just like to say thank you for that wonderful statement. And I'd just like to add on that as we reflect on Vietnam's remarkable journey towards becoming a tech powerhouse, another pivotal aspect we must consider is the role of international collaborations in this growth. As someone living in Vietnam, I have absorbed firsthand the impact of global partnerships that have fueled our local innovations and technological capabilities. These international collaborations are not just about financial investments, but also involve knowledge exchange and technological transfers. For instance, partnerships with tech giants such as Samsung from Korea, Intel from the US, and Panasonic from Japan have introduced advanced technological practices and standards that are critical for our local startups. Samsung notably has made significant investments in Vietnam, including a 220 million R&D center in Hanoi, which is not just a facility but a hub of innovation fostering local talent and technologies. Moreover, these partnerships have played a crucial role in refining our technological infrastructure and have been instrumental in upskilling our workforce. They provide Vietnamese professionals with young talents with exposure to cutting-edge technologies and global business practices, thereby enhancing our capabilities and competitiveness. This dynamic exchange is vital as it not only boosts our tech sector but also strengthens our international relationships, paving the way for a resilient and sustainable tech ecosystem in Vietnam. As we continue to embrace these international collaborations, it's crucial to consider how they shape our technological landscape and what it means for our for our local and future economic trajectory on the global stage. So, what do you guys think about this?
Shazib, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, sure. To add more information, I think, yeah, Neev, I'd agree with you. And Araf, I think you also touched on the foreign investments a bit. And I'd say, in my opinion, adding more on this topic, like, for example, countries like South Korea, Japan, and the US have made substantial investments in Vietnam's tech sector. And South Korean tech giants, Samsung, for example, has established one of its largest manufacturing hubs in Vietnam, contributing billions to the economy. And this investment has not only fueled the job creation, but it has also enabled Vietnam to position itself as a critical player in global electronics manufacturing. And in fact, as of today, Vietnam produces a significant portion of the world's smartphones, contributing directly to its GDP growth. And Japan and Singapore have also increased their presence in Vietnam's tech landscape as Japanese firms are focusing on digital transformation and smart city projects, while Singaporean investors are backing startups, particularly in fintech and e-commerce sectors. Meanwhile, the US is playing a crucial role through partnerships with Vietnamese tech firms and investments in AI and green technology initiatives. And when it comes to trade, Vietnam has capitalized on its tech growth by improving its trade performance, and the country's exports, particularly of electronics and high tech goods, have surged. And in 2023 alone, Vietnam's tech exports hit record high, and the country became one of the top exporters of electronics in Southeast Asia. And these gains are largely of the result of free trade agreements, such as the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership and the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement. And these agreements have opened up new markets for Vietnamese products, and it has also lowered trade barriers. So overall, it is like, for Vietnam, it is driving economic growth and increasing Vietnam's global competitiveness.
Yeah, I would agree with Shazib and what Neev has said regarding Vietnam's progress in foreign direct investment and in equitable economic growth. And I would also like to talk about the fact that Vietnam as a country, I would say one of the reasons why Vietnam has progressed. So why Vietnam has progressed so much is the reason that Vietnam, the country's government is extremely strong and it's not corrupt, unlike other countries in Southeast Asia. For example, like recently, I think it was like a couple of months ago, in like around April, in Ho Chi Minh, the trial of the century took place, in which a trial of the century took place, in which a Vietnamese real estate tycoon named Truong Mai Lan was sentenced to death for her role in a $12 billion financial scam. So this just shows that Vietnam, no matter how rich a person is, Vietnam is Vietnam's judiciary system and Vietnam's government is still very strict, and they do not exonerate anyone who tries to break the law and who tries to bend the law. And this is something that even advanced economies, they have not been able to do. So I would say kudos to Vietnam regarding that. And also additionally, I would like to talk about the influence of other major powers in Vietnam. So I would say, in terms of I would say Vietnam's tech sector is influenced by a lot of foreign powers, because Vietnam is in the epicenter of the Southeast Asia, geographically speaking, and therefore a lot of foreign powers have an interest in Vietnam. Particularly, I would say the United States, China, Japan, and South Korea. The US, for example, has a relationship with Vietnam, which is exemplified by collaboration between Vietnamese companies and US giants like Intel and Apple. Intel, for instance, has invested over $1 billion in semiconductors fabrication facility in Ho Chi Minh City, which not only boosts Vietnam's tech infrastructure, but also aligns with the US strategy to diversify its supply chains away from China. And China, for instance, is Vietnam's neighbor and one of its largest trading partners. And China plays a significant role in Vietnam's tech sector. Chinese companies, I would say, like Tencent and Huawei, have been active in Vietnam and offers investments and technological solutions. I would say, however, Vietnam maintains a cautious stance due to the geopolitical tensions and concerns over security and dependency, particularly evident in its hesitancy to fully embrace Huawei's 5G technology. And as for Japan and South Korea, I would say South Korea, Samsung has made substantial investments in Vietnam, as Neev was saying. And also in Japan, companies like Fujitsu and Panasonic have been focusing on Vietnam's emerging market. And so I would say overall, there's a lot of foreign powers which influence Vietnam's tech sectors. And I would say Vietnam, as of today, as of right now, they have been cautiously trading the waters. They are not particularly choosing any side. I would say in most cases they are neutral, and I think what Vietnam is doing is just capitalizing of this situation, which I think is a very smart thing to do.
Thank you, Ari, Mr. Neef, Manuja, and Shazib Karim, for valuable insights in this topic. And to this topic is again episode 26, Silicon Ambitions, Vietnam's tech booms and Southeast Asia's quest for economic transformation. And I think, talking about Vietnam's tech boom, Vietnam is obviously emerging as a significant technology hub in Southeast Asia, driven by government initiatives, foreign investments, and a thriving startup ecosystem. The digital economy contributed approximately 10% of Vietnam's GDP in 2023, a figure expected to grow significantly over the next decade. And the information and communications technology (ICT) sector grew annually by 9.5% between 2017 and 2023. And 70% of Vietnam's population is under the age of 35, providing a young, dynamic, and increasingly tech-savvy labor pool. And the National Digital Transformation Program, which was between 2020 and 2025 in Vietnam, aims to accelerate Vietnam's transition to a digital economy, targeting 20% of GDP from the digital economy by 2025. And the Vietnam Silicon Valley Project is a government-backed initiative modeled after Silicon Valley, aimed at fostering tech startups and attracting global tech companies. And there's also e-government development, including investment in the digital public services, placing Vietnam at 86 globally in the 2022 United Nations E-Government Development Index. And Vietnam also has a high FDI in the high-tech industries. For example, Vietnam attracted over $18 billion in FDI in 2022, with 60% of these funds directed towards a high-tech manufacturing and ICT sectors. And the top investors include South Korea, Japan, Singapore, and the US in the Vietnam's tech industry. And Vietnam also expanded its supply chain operations. Apple also expanded its supply chain operations to Vietnam, while Samsung, as Neef Manuja has mentioned, invested over $17 billion in manufacturing with a focus on smartphone and chip production. And Vietnam's startup ecosystem has also exploded with over to 3,000 startups as of 2023, ranging from fintech, e-commerce, AI, and software development. And Vietnam has also produced a few notable unicorns, such as VNG Corporation, a gaming and social media giant, and Momo, leading mobile payments platform valued at over $2 billion. And in 2023, Vietnam startups secured nearly 1.5 billion dollars in venture capital, up from 1.3 billion dollars in 2022, with fintech, AI, and e-commerce leading the sectors for investment. And the digital economy of Vietnam has also seen a lot of growth. For example, the Vietnam's e-commerce market grew by 30 to 35% annually, reaching 16 billion dollars in 2023. And this rapid growth is fueled by increased internet penetration and mobile payment adoption. And with 77 million internet users in Vietnam, it has seen a lot of internet users. As of right now in 2024, it has over 80% of its population connected to the internet, supporting rapid digitalization in commerce, education, entertainment. And with 98 million mobile phone subscribers, mobile platforms are also central to Vietnam's digital economy, particularly in e-commerce, mobile banking, and online gaming. What do you think, Mr. Ari Malik, Mr. Neev Manuja, Mr. Shazib Karim? What do you think is Vietnam's future when it comes to the tech industry, and how can Vietnam do more to make its digital economy much bigger than it is currently right now? Mr. Ari Malik, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, so I would say looking ahead, I would say Vietnam's future as a leader in Southeast Asia is exceptionally promising. I would say because first of all we have to understand that Vietnam is an emerging economy, which means that majority of its economy is untapped. And not only that, Vietnam has extremely low wages for workers, with many which is actually what drives many foreign international companies to go to Vietnam, I would say. And additionally, I would say that we have to understand the demographic of Vietnam, because Vietnam is one of those countries in Southeast Asia which has a particularly high demographic of young people, young labor force. And therefore, it's no surprise that the average labor productivity of Vietnam has only been increasing after the foreign companies have come to Vietnam and have tapped this demographic of young people. So I would say, I would actually like to connect this to Bangladesh, because I think Bangladesh and Vietnam's economies are really similar in the way that both of these countries are manufacturer and export oriented based. And Bangladesh and Vietnam both export a lot of garment and textile and ready-made garments, RMI. And I would say Vietnam is, from my perspective, I think Vietnam is following. Vietnam has similar economic model to Bangladesh, but Vietnam is just 10 years ahead of us, or 5 years ahead of us, because Vietnam has capitalized on the skilled labor force. Their labor force is actually skilled, and we have seen that when a country's labor force becomes skilled, just how much the country's GDP boosts, just how much the country improves. Like even the United States, for example, in the 50s and 60s, in Boston, for example, there was a lot of textile and garments mills there. But after the US, in the 60s, after the 60s boom, or during the 60s boom, the US labor became more skilled, and from then on, the US has just become the world's largest economy. So I would say highly intelligent and highly skilled labor force is predominantly what's needed for a country to be successful. And I would say Vietnam has realized that, and that's why Vietnam is slowly moving away from the low skilled industries such as textile and ready-made garments to more skilled industries such as making cars, for example. Vietnam is making now EV cars now, and also more skilled sectors like technological manufacturing and semiconductor manufacturing, which is why I think Vietnam's economy is very promising, in my opinion. And I would also think that this is something that Bangladesh might want to consider in the future as well.
So I would like to contribute to this statement, and I'd just like to say, looking ahead, Vietnam's future as a tech leader in Southeast Asia appears exceptionally promising. And as I mentioned before, living in Vietnam, I've seen firsthand how rapid technological adoption and innovation are setting the stage for a future that's not only digitally inclusive, but also economically transformative. Vietnam is positioning itself as a central player in the global tech landscape, pivoting from being primarily an outsourcing destination to a hub for tech innovation. The country's young tech-savvy population is a significant asset. Approximately 70% of the Viet population is under the age of 35, providing a vibrant demographic foundation for tech-driven growth. This demographic advantage is coupled with increasing internet penetration and mobile device usage, creating fertile ground for digital services and startups. The government's ongoing commitment to education, particularly in STEM fields, and its efforts to improve English proficiency are preparing a workforce ready to meet the demands of the global tech economy. Additionally, the launch of new tech parks and innovation zones with incentives for tech firms are expected to attract further foreign investment. Vietnam's strategic geographical location, acting as a gateway between ASEAN countries and China, also offers significant logistical advantages for tech manufacturing and export-oriented tech businesses. The country is poised to become a major link in the global supply chains, particularly in electronics and digital products. As Vietnam continues to develop policies that support technological advancement and international cooperation, it is likely to see increased participation in global tech projects and enhanced local innovation capacities. This forward momentum could propel Vietnam not just to regional leadership in tech, but also to a significant role on the world stage. So, how do you envision the impact of these developments on Vietnam's position in the global tech industry?
Shazib, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, sure, Malik. So, as we were discussing and talking about Vietnam's digitalization and how it's becoming more digital day by day, I think adding on and in my personal opinion, one of the standout areas in Vietnam's digital economy is e-commerce. The country's e-commerce market has grown exponentially, and platforms like Tiki, Shopee, and Lazada have become household names. And in fact, Vietnam's e-commerce sector is projected to reach a market value of 39 billion by 2025, making it one of the most dynamic global digital markets in Southeast Asia. So, factors like high smartphone usage, a young tech-savvy population, and improved internet penetration have made online shopping a cultural norm. And alongside e-commerce, fintech is playing a major role in Vietnam's digital economy, and the rise of mobile payments and digital wallets like Momo and ZaloPay has revolutionized how people manage money. And these fintech innovations have been particularly effective in improving financial inclusion, especially in rural areas where traditional banking services are limited. And this digital transformation is bringing millions of previously unbanked individuals into a formal economy, further fueling economic growth. And I'd say another another significant development in Vietnam's digital economy is the focus on digital startups, as Vietnam is quickly becoming a hub for tech entrepreneurship, with startups working in fields like AI, blockchain, and software development. And government support through tech incubators and accelerators, along with the surge of venture capital investment, has propelled the country's startup to ecosystem into the global spotlight. And in fact, Vietnam is now second only to Singapore in Southeast Asia in terms of startup funding, with billions of dollars flowing into the tech space annually. And digitalization is not just transforming consumer markets, but it's also traditional sectors like agriculture and manufacturing. And smart farming technologies are being adapted to increase crop yields and reduce costs. While Industry 4.0 technologies such as automation and the Internet of Things are optimizing production process and manufacturing, but these shifts are enhancing productivity, making Vietnam more competitive in global markets and positioning it as a leader in the digital transformation of traditional industries.
Arif, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yes. Yeah, my mic was not turning on. So yeah, I would also like to talk about some of the regional dynamics and agreements that Vietnam has been involved in, which I think is also crucial to mention. So first of all, with ASEAN, which is basically the EU, but for Southeast Asia. But with ASEAN, I would say Vietnam promotes its regional tech cooperation to create a more unified digital market. And I would say this regional approach not only strengthens collective bargaining power, but also promotes the shared standards and interoperability among member states, which is crucial for attracting tech giants. And also, I would say another comprehensive and progressive agreement would be the Trans-Pacific Partnership. the CPTPP, and as a signatory, I would say Vietnam benefits from the CPTPP, which reduces tariffs and opens up access to key markets from its burgeoning tech sector. And this agreement also stipulates standards for digital trade and intellectual property rights, aligning Vietnam with international norms. However, I would say some of the challenges and opportunities that arise from this is the intellectual property and regulatory challenges. And I would say as Vietnam integrates more deeply into the global tech ecosystem, it faces challenges in protecting intellectual property and adhering to international regulatory standards. And I would say strengthening its legal framework is therefore essential to foster a secure and attractive investment environment. And also, I would say, as Vietnam pushes for digital sovereignty through laws requiring local data storage, this is also a sector which can potentially poses potential friction with foreign tech firms and governments advocating for a free flow of data. So I would say Vietnam's tech sector is intricately linked to a lot of foreign dynamics, and also linked to regulatory challenges, which I think is not really which I don't see it in a negative light. It's actually expected, because emerging nations do not have strong tech regulations. But as Vietnam is emerging out, as Vietnam is in a country which is emerging out of the manufacturing base to a tech base, I would say this is expected. But I would say I'm not really concerned regarding Vietnam's government, because Vietnam's government, as I've said before, is extremely, I wouldn't say it's perfect, but I would say Vietnam's government is extremely strict regarding its regulations. As I've said before, a billionaire, a real estate tycoon with $12 billion fraud, was sentenced to death. So this just shows that Vietnam is basically not going to engage in tomfoolery. Vietnam is extremely gonna strict, and it's going to adhere to its regulations. So based on that, I would say Vietnam shouldn't be worried at all. And I would say as long as the tech regulations are set in place and are rectified by the government, Vietnam is positioned to capitalize on this burgeoning industry.
Thank you, Arif Malik, for your invaluable opinions. Also, thank you to Mr. Neev, Manuja, and Shazib Karim. I also think Vietnam has also a lot of tech talent and workforce development, as some of you have mentioned. For example, Vietnam has been placing a strong emphasis on STEM education, with over 400,000 students graduating annually from universities, mainly in IT, engineering, and computer science. And the country has around 1 million workers in the ICT sector, with demand projected to grow by 10 to 15% annually, creating a shortage of highly skilled professionals in AI, data science, and software engineering. And initiatives such as Google's Digital 4.0 and Microsoft Skills for Jobs programs are helping Vietnam close the tech skills gap. And there's also a lot of challenges and risks for tech ambitions in Vietnam also. And despite a large and young workforce, there is a shortage of highly skilled tech professionals in areas such as AI, blockchain, and software engineering. By 2025, Vietnam could face a shortfall of around 150,000 ICT workers, and Vietnam's digital infrastructure is still developing, particularly in rural areas where internet connectivity and access to technology are limited. And Vietnam's data localization laws and cybersecurity regulations present challenges for foreign tech firms operating in the country. And now talking a little bit about the Southeast Asia's quest for economic transformation, and especially when referring to Southeast Asia, I believe it's easy to refer to them as ASEAN, because they're ASEAN nations. So ASEAN digital economy has a great potential. For example, the digital economy across Southeast Asia is projected to reach $1 trillion by 2030, driven by strong growth in Indonesia, the Philippines, Thailand, and Vietnam. And Vietnam has a lot of contribution to ASEAN tech ecosystem as well. Vietnam is positioned as the second largest digital economy in ASEAN, following Indonesia, and is a crucial player in regional digital trade. And Vietnam's fintech industry is growing at a rapid pace, with over 40% of adults using digital payment platforms in 2023. And Indonesia, as the largest economy, has the largest economy in ASEAN, as we have talked about, is also experiencing a tech boom. However, Vietnam's political stability, ease of doing business, and strategic location make it highly competitive as a regional tech hub. And while Singapore also remains the financial and technological capital of Southeast Asia, Vietnam's lower cost of operation and large workforce are drawing investors looking to diversify their regional tech operations. And Thailand and Malaysia are also competing with Vietnam in high-tech manufacturing, but Vietnam's aggressive digital transformation policy policies and FDI-friendly environment have given it a competitive edge. So, what do you think are the challenges facing the East Asian nations, and what do you think? How do you think these challenges may be overcome, Mr. Arif Malik, Shazib Karim, or Mr. Neef Manuja? Mr. Shazib Karim, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yeah, sure. So I'd completely agree with you, and I think you brought up an interesting question on what challenges they may face and the obstacles they have to face and how they may overcome it. So I think, in my opinion, one of the most pressing challenges in Vietnam's tech landscape is the shortage of skilled talent, maybe because while the country has a young dynamic population, the tech industry requires specialized skills, particularly in fields like software development, artificial intelligence, data science, and cybersecurity. And currently the demand for tech professionals far outweighs the supply, and which could limit Vietnam's ability to sustain its tech boom in the long term. And I think to address this, Vietnam needs to prioritize education and workforce development. And one approach is expanding tech related programs at universities and vocational schools to equip the next generation with the necessary skills. And moreover, public private partnerships between tech companies and educational institutions could create specialized training programs that focus on emerging technologies like AI, cloud computing, and blockchain. And foreign companies investing in Vietnam can also offer mentorship programs, internships, and on-the-job training to help close the skills gaps. And additionally, the Vietnamese government should continue to attract international talent by offering competitive incentives for skilled workers to relocate and contribute to the tech ecosystem. And I think, in my opinion, another challenge Vietnam faces is regulatory uncertainty in its tech sector. The rapid pace of digital innovation often outpaces the ability of governments to regulate it effectively. And Vietnam's current legal framework for data protection, e-commerce, and digital finance is still developing, creating uncertainty for both local businesses and foreign investors. And I think to overcome this, Vietnam can overcome this by establishing a clear and comprehensive regulatory framework for the digital economy. And this would involve updating and harmonizing laws on data privacy, intellectual property rights, and digital payments to reflect the realities of a tech driven economy. And the government should also engage with industry stakeholders, both domestic and foreign, to ensure that the regulations are balanced and encourage innovation without stifling growth. Additionally, adopting international best practices and collaborating with other countries in Southeast Asia could help Vietnam create a more business friendly environment for tech companies and startups.
Before I would let Mr. Arif Malik give his concluding discussion, I would just like to say a penultimate statement by saying, as Vietnam strides toward becoming a tech leader, several challenges need careful navigation to sustain this growth trajectory. And living in Vietnam, since I've observed these issues firsthand, addressing them is crucial for our continued development in the tech sector. As for talented shortage and a skill mismatch, despite there being a young, eager population, there's a notable gap in high-tech skills required for cutting-edge sectors like AI, machine learning, and advanced data analytics. Universities are producing graduates, but the rapid pace of the technological evolution means that many are not equipped with the latest skills required by the industry. So bridging this skill gap is critical, requiring both educational reforms and expanded vocational training programs. So as for the infrastructure constraints, while major cities like Ho Chi Minh and Hanoi are advancing, other parts of Vietnam still struggle with adequate technological infrastructure, and also they struggle with reliable internet access, power supply issues, and logistics remains a problematic thing in rural and remote areas, hampering broader tech adoption and development. So although there have been significant improvements in Vietnam's regulatory framework for tech, it still needs more clarity and consistency because issues such as data protection laws, intellectual property rights, and the legal complexities of international partnerships need streamline regulations to foster a more conducive environment for tech growth. And as digital economy expands, so does the vulnerability to cyber threats. And Vietnam has also experienced increased cyber attacks in recent years, highlighting the need for robust cybersecurity measures to protect both national and business interests. Vietnam's tech sector has seen substantial boost from foreign direct investment. However, there is a risk of becoming too dependent on foreign entities, which could influence local tech development and economic policies. Cultivating homegrown companies and reducing dependency on foreign investment is essential for long-term sustainability. Lastly, I'd just like to say that addressing these challenges requires a multifaceted approach, including policy reforms, investment in human capital, and infrastructure development. In addition, fostering a culture of innovation. By tackling these issues, Vietnam can solidify its position as a tech hub and leverage its full potential in the global tech arena. So, Arif, how would you like to conclude this discussion?
Yeah, so I agree with what Neev Manuja has said, and yeah, like I would say like Vietnam is positioned on this burgeoning industry, of course, to succeed. And I would say I wouldn't say there is a talent shortage. I would say there is a shortage in deploying the necessary skills to develop a workforce capable of handling complex and tech-driven tasks, I would say. And as of this moment, I would say Vietnam still faces a skill gap in its tech workforce compared to other nations such as South Korea, Japan, or even Taiwan. I would say Vietnam isn't shouldn't be necessarily concerned. Like Vietnam has a lot of population. Vietnam's population is young. Vietnam's population is passionate. Vietnam's population is also very innovative regarding the tech industry sector, because as I mentioned before, Vietnam, if I'm not mistaken, is the only country in Southeast Asia, only the emerging economy, to have developed an electronic vehicle industry. Not many countries have been able to do that, and therefore there is still a lot of talent in Vietnam. The people just need to be equipped with the correct skill set to fully use that. So yeah, I would say in terms of Vietnam's tech industry, I'm really positive about the Vietnam's tech industry. And as of today, I would say Vietnam's tech industry will be profitable. It might be tenfold times more successful in terms of market cap in the future. So in conclusion, I would say I'm extremely positive in Vietnam's tech industry.
Thank you, Mr. Arif Malik, Shazib King, and Neef Manager, for your invaluable opinions. And in my opinion, I think there's also a lot of future potential for the Southeast Asian economy and Vietnam in particular. For example, the Vietnam's digital economy is expected to grow by 15 to 20% annually, reaching $43 billion by 2025. And Vietnam's tech exports, especially electronics and mobile devices, are projected to surpass $150 billion by 2025 as global tech companies continue to move their supply chains to Vietnam. And Vietnam's fintech sector is also projected to reach $18 billion in market value by 2025, driven by rising adoption of digital payments, leading platforms, and e-wallets. And so, my question to all of you before we end our discussion and before we reach a conclusion is that, do you think that the development in Southeast Asia when it comes to technology, and particularly in Vietnam, will have spillover effects in other parts of the world also? Mr. Arif Malik, I see your hand is raised. Would you like to add anything?
Yes, yes. So, yeah, my mic wasn't turning on. So, yeah, I would definitely agree that Vietnam's tech industry will have a spillover effect in the rest of the world. But I would say it will have a spillover effect in its neighboring region mostly, because first of all, we have to understand that the spillover effect that Vietnam's tech industry will create is a positive spillover effect for the entire manufacturing based economies. And this will also, I would say, impact other nations and other nations in the world. Particularly, I like to see that Bangladesh will be definitely influenced by this spillover effect in terms of capitalizing on the human capital development and ensuring that Bangladeshi economy is also more skilled. And also, I would say the manufacturing and supply chain enhancement will also be affected, because Vietnam has positioned itself as a major hub for electronics manufacturing. and especially as companies look to diversify their supply chains away from China. So I would say the growth of the tech industry in emerging nations will be the main cause, will likely create a spillover effect for the entire emerging economies in the rest of the world. And other than that, I would also say that this another spillover effect would be the startup ecosystem. For example, in Vietnam, cities like Ho Chi Minh, where Neev Manuja lives, there he has mentioned that there's a lot of tech entrepreneurship and innovation. So I would say this will definitely create a spillover effect by inspiring more startups in various industries such as fintech, e-commerce, and even biotech. And I would say this increased venture capital flows into the tech sector would also benefit other industries as investors seek new opportunities. So at the end of the day, the world is moving up. The world is continuously growing. The world is continuously moving at a fast speed in this digital age. So it doesn't really, from my point of view, countries need to think in terms of the future. And I would say manufacturing based economies are basically manufacturing based economies are not necessarily bad. They're what majority of the poor countries actually employ in order to be a developing country. And once they're a developing country, they can employ a more technological based sectors, which is what Vietnam is doing. So I would say Vietnam's industry, in essence, has a very positive spillover effect for rest of the emerging economies in the world, particularly for Bangladesh, I would say.
Yeah, Ariman, I fully agree with you, and I think to add my own opinion with this, I'd say that Vietnam's tech boom is already creating ripples in global supply chains as international companies seek to diversify their production lines away from China. Vietnam has become an attractive alternative for manufacturing high-tech products like smartphones, semiconductors, and electronics. And this shift is a part of a larger trend called China Plus One, where companies are expanding their production beyond China to avoid over reliance on one country. And the spillover impact here is significant. By becoming a critical node in global supply chains, Vietnam is helping multinational corporations like Samsung, Apple, and Intel manage production risks and reduce costs. And this shift has implications for global trade flows, as more high tech goods are now being produced and exported from Vietnam to markets in the US, Europe, and across Asia. And as more companies relocate their manufacturing bases or create new facilities in Vietnam, the entire global supply chain landscape is being reshaped, making Vietnam an increasingly vital player. And Vietnam's development is also having a regional spillover effect, influencing other Southeast Asian countries. As Vietnam leads the way in digitalization and tech exports, other nations like Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia are taking notice and making similar investments in their tech sectors. And this regional competition is creating a wave of economic integration within Southeast Asia. Countries are collaborating on infrastructure projects, digital agreements, and tech initiatives through organizations like the ASEAN. And Vietnam's success serves as a model for these neighboring countries, pushing them to modernize their economies and compete for foreign investment in high tech industries. And this collective growth in Southeast Asia has the potential to turn the region into a global digital powerhouse, benefiting not just Vietnam, but the entire bloc.
In 2023, Vietnam's digital economy was valued at $23 billion, and this growth is not limited to the tech sector. The ripple effects are transforming industries across the board. Take manufacturing, for example. Vietnam is now responsible for 20% of global smartphone exports. The demand for high-tech products is driving a new wave of industrialization, where traditional manufacturing sectors are benefiting from increased innovation and automation. This creates opportunities for companies producing everything from electronic components to logistic services, fueling economic growth beyond just tech. The spillover is also evident in human capital, as in the last 5 years, the demand for skilled workers in tech has skyrocketed to 56%. This has led to increased investment in education, with more universities and training centers focusing on STEM fields. What is the result? A more skilled and adaptable workforce that benefits all industries, not just tech. As we continue to embrace technology, these spillover effects will reshape agriculture, healthcare, and even tourism. as they adopt digital solutions to improve efficiency and productivity. The tech industry is not an isolated sector. Its growth is a catalyst for the progress across the entire economy.
Thank you, Mr. Neev Manuja, Mr. Shazib Karim, and Mr. Arif Malik for your invaluable opinions. And in my opinion, Vietnam's rapid rise as a tech hub and its ambitions to become the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asia reflect broader transformations happening across the region. And with strong government support, strategic FDI, and a burgeoning startup ecosystem, Vietnam is well positioned to lead the region's digital transformation. However, addressing challenges such as the tech skills and digital infrastructure and regulatory issues will be critical to ensuring sustainable growth and achieving its silicon ambition. So, is there a conclusion that each one of you agree with, Mr. Neev Manuja, Shazib Karim, and Mr. Arif Malik?
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, I would agree.
Thank you, all of you, for your agreements. And that brings us to the end of our discussion today. Episode 26, Silicon Ambitions, Vietnam Tech Boom, and Southeast Asia's Quest for Economic Transformation with Mr. Neev Manuja. Mr. Neev Manuja, are there any final words that you would like to say before we leave for today?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I was thrilled to join today's episode of Dollar Dialogue, and I believe this podcast is truly exceptional for sharing economic and financial knowledge. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to discuss Vietnam's exciting tech evolution and for such a warm welcome. I'm super grateful to have been part of this enlightening conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Neev Manuja, for that concluding statement. And again, that brings us to the end of episode 26, which was Silicon Ambitions, Vietnam's Tech Boom, and Southeast Asia's Quest for Economic Transformation with Mr. Neev Manuja. Mr. Neev Manuja, thank you so much for joining into this podcast and sharing your valuable opinions as you live in a Southeast Asian country and as you live in Vietnam. And thank you to the audience for listening to this discussion. I hope that you enjoyed it and you were able to learn a little bit about Southeast Asia's digital economy and its potential for growth in the future. And then and thank you. And that is the end for today's episode. We hope to see you next week with another very interesting guest speaker with another very interesting episode. So thank you and goodbye for now.